Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. This week I am joined by Dylan, and now he's the host of a podcast which I've been listening to quite a lot of recently, Paranormal Thoughts Podcast. You've mostly heard of it. We're going to talk about a whole manner of things, from ghosts, UFOs, alien abductions. So without further ado, let me bring Dylan in, and we're going to find out a little bit more about what he does with his podcast. Hi Dylan.
Hey Reeves, how are you?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. You doing all right?
Yeah, doing well.
Good. So before we run ahead and start getting into all the crazy stuff, which is the paranormal, you've got a podcast yourself.
I have always been, I'm a musician and I do audio production and so on. So I've always kind of had the equipment, I guess, that I could produce a podcast. But so that was kind of one part of it. But it was literally, I got home really early one morning after I was doing some work and so on. And then I, at that time, had been listening to a lot of paranormal podcasts and I guess just really reflecting on my thoughts and opinions on it all. And so this early this one morning, I kind of sat down and recorded maybe like a 20-minute. It was almost like a audio journal kind of entry. It's kind of how I was treating it. I mean, you listen back to it and it kind of does sound like I was doing a podcast, but at that time I wasn't really sure. I wasn't going into it being like, I'm going to start this is going to be a thing. But yeah, I recorded for about 20 minutes just on some of my thoughts at that sort of time. And then I literally uploaded it online and I titled it Paranormal Thoughts, because that's literally what that 20 minutes was about, was my thoughts on the paranormal. Chucked the word podcast on the end, and it's kind of just been the last almost 7 years now of my life. I started it at the age of 20, so literally my entire 20s have been on the internet talking about the paranormal, which is pretty surreal. I didn't really think it would go the way it kind of has in that amount of time, but yeah, it was it was quite organic. And then, once people kind of started to listen, I was like, okay, there's maybe something to this. And I just, haven't really looked back since that time.
Time flies, doesn't it? I mean,
it does.
I've been doing this, 12 years, something like that. And it's like, when you look back, you think, wow, even in general, just time just goes. And the older you get, I'm middle-aged now, so it's like you look back and you think, wow, 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever, and it's like you think of all those things you're doing and stuff, and it's like, wow, it does your head in sometimes, doesn't it? So you've got this podcast, and I've listened to a lot of episodes, and you kind of cover a lot of topics. Was that kind of your idea when you started out? You want to do every little bit of everything, or is it kind of organically grown that way over time?
I think I just wanted to talk about things that interest me. And I guess a lot of the early episodes were topics that I had some knowledge about at that time, so I could really speak to that, to those, certain topics and so on. But then over time, I kind of branched out and started really, I was like, okay, say something like, even like the Mothman for one, I was like, I'm familiar with the concept of it, but then I was like, well, I'll do an episode, and then kind of went into the whole sort of backstory. So a lot of it is kind of investigating and doing research, and then being able to share that with people online. So a lot of the episodes have been about things that I didn't really know too much about, other than maybe a name or something kind of along those lines, and then just doing the research and trying to approach things maybe a little bit differently to some of the other ways that people go about it. But it was really, I guess the whole sort of foundation was for me to get more understanding around these topics. Like probably, I would have probably done that research even without the podcast in a sense, at times. So I guess the podcast is kind of like an organic medium as well, in the sense of, I was already interested in this stuff, so I'm more than happy to share what I've sort of found and, hopefully maybe educate or entertain anyone who wants to listen.
Did you, when you were growing up, when you was like a little not a little boy, but a young man, did you have an interest in like the paranormal or science fiction or whatever that kind of kindled that sort of interest?
Yeah, I think for as long as I can remember, there's been a weird interest in the sort of the spooky and the scary. I mean, I was literally just talking to my wife about this, I think yesterday. She showed me a video of like a 6-year-old getting her face painted, and she wanted to be Pennywise from It. And I said to my wife, I was like, I literally did that same sort of thing when I was a kid, where you get your face painted. I wanted to be like a vampire, or like a skeleton. I didn't want to be Spider-Man or whatever. Like, so even thinking back that far, I've always had this interest. And then I guess, yeah, as I kind of got a little older, the interest kind of became maybe more of an obsession, and I guess trying to find answers with a lot of it. I guess it all kind of started out with probably more of your hauntings and so on. And I've always had this weird attraction to aliens and kind of the abduction phenomena. Like, I got into that really young, which is kind of unusual, but I feel like now, even reflecting on that all these years later, I feel like it may have actually been for a reason, unbeknownst to me at that time. But I feel like there's been some really weird things surrounding that kind of topic for me, kind of since starting this podcast. So, but yeah, it's hard to really say where it all kind of stemmed from, but it's all encompassing, and yeah, it definitely started at a young age. So yeah, it's weird to think that that kind of strange kid with all these weird interests, where people at that sort of time were really nowhere near as open as it's kind of cool to enjoy UFOs and so on now, but like 20 odd years ago, still very different. People would think like, oh, you don't actually believe that, do you? And well, that's really weird kind of thing. So yeah, very different kind of landscape to how we've sort of adapted, and it appears that people have more of an open stance. Still like a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but I feel like some of these sort of topics are a little more, a little less niche and a little more accessible to like a wider group of people.
Yeah, I think if you look back to, I don't know, when I grew up, when I was a wee lad back in the 1970s, you had a lot of UFO shows, ghost shows on the telly. They were more like mini documentaries. It wasn't like the explosion that we had in like the 90s and the 2000s of like your Most Haunted and 40 and Times and all that stuff, when it became TV shows. But back then, in the early days of documentaries and stuff, it was more of a show that was on the telly for half an hour, and it was about a guy that was maybe going around and investigating different places or interviewing different people. And the people would be like just your average person, a housewife, who would basically be interviewed and said, well, I was cooking dinner, and little Timmy come up to me and said, oh, there's an alien man at the road, and he wanted to take me in his spaceship. And, back then somebody would tell a story like that and they'd be a laughing stock, because clearly they're just doing it for attention. But that could have really happened, But now it's completely different. Everyone takes it super seriously, and everyone's like, battling with one another. It's kind of flipped over, like, on its head. But so when you were getting a bit older and you got interested in this stuff, did you ever go on any? I mean, when I was a teenager, get your mates, that house up the road is haunted, we're going to go investigate. Did you ever do any of that stuff?
Yeah, not so much when I was growing up, I suppose. Maybe as I was a little older, doing, I'd jump on a paranormal investigation with some experts and so on. I've been able to do an investigation for the podcast as well, which is pretty interesting. I feel like that was a little different to maybe a typical kind of paranormal investigation. But I mean, the stuff that kind of I experienced at a young age was often we had a few years there where when I was living at home with my parents, We had like a bunch of family members die kind of consecutively. And it did seem like when someone would pass, there would be activity in the house. Your typical kind of thing of footsteps when, all of us were downstairs having dinner, and then upstairs, you're hearing someone walking around like clear as day. I remember coming home one day and I thought that someone else was home because there was all this kind of ruckus going on upstairs. I must have assumed it was my sister or something. And kind of half an hour sort of passed, and then like I hadn't kind of seen from her or heard from her. And then I kind of went upstairs and I was like, oh, she's not here. It's really strange things of feeling like you weren't actually alone. I remember like even sitting in the lounge room and you could see into the kitchen where the dishwasher was, and the dishwasher kind of has, that kind of stainless steel kind of reflective, look to it. But obviously in the stainless steel, everything's like distorted, but you'd be sitting there in the lounge room watching TV and constantly you just kind of get these darts of something moving, as if there was someone walking by, but no one was there. I even remember one evening I was sitting on our patio and my back was facing the kitchen and we didn't have any lights on outside. So all the light was bleeding from the kitchen. So my back's facing towards the kitchen. I'm facing a wall. I'm talking to my mum. And then this perfect like silhouette of a shadow projects onto the wall as if it was, someone behind me in the kitchen, the lights casted over there. And I once again assumed it was, my sister or something. And then I was like, where'd she go? Like she was just here. And then half an hour later, she comes downstairs. I was like, were you here before? Did you walk into the kitchen? She's like, no, I haven't been downstairs in hours. So a lot of weird things kind of like that, like never anything sinister or, it's always those like little glimpses where you're like, oh, it was weird, but was it actually, paranormal? But I think when you kind of add it all up over all those sort of years and sort of times, I'm like, well, I think there was definitely something unusual going on there. So it was definitely a great kind of introduction, I think, where I was able to witness some sort of, unusual events that I guess really spiked my interest.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the hearing movement in your home after family members had passed away. I had a similar experience with after my mother passed. She died at home in her sleep, and maybe about 3 or 4 days after she, they took her away and stuff and all those things. Her room wasn't. It wasn't. We hadn't done anything to the room, and I was at home at the time because obviously my dad was quite distraught, obviously, and I was staying in the spare room, which was adjacent, connected by a dividing drywall to the room that she was in, because my dad had a back problem, so he needed a special, like a really special mattress because of his back. So my mum had her own room because she couldn't sleep on that bed. It was just too uncomfortable. So she had these fitted wardrobes in her room, and every night when she would go to bed, you'd hear the slats of the doors opening and closing where she was putting stuff away or getting bedding out or whatever. And about 3 or 4 days after, I was back at home because I had to be there for my dad because he was all over the shop. And I woke up I'd been snoozing on the bed. I was in the spare room, and I woke up because I could clearly hear about 11:30 at night the slats in the room next door, where my mum's bedroom, the slats of the doors opening and closing. And for a moment, I thought to myself, what the hell's my dad doing? If this time, he should be in bed. I made sure he'd gone to bed. He went to bed at like 9 o'clock. And I called out for him, and I didn't get no response. And I opened my door, and the whole landing and that was in darkness, and the room my mum's room was in darkness, but the door was ajar. And I walked out onto the landing, and I slowly pushed her door open, expecting to see a silhouette of my dad in the room, thinking he's, whatever. And there's no one in there. There's absolutely no one in there. And I went back into my room and sat on my bed thinking, what on earth was that? Did I dream it? Anyway, a few nights later, the same thing happened again, the same week, at the end of the week. I had the same, and this time I was wide awake. I was sat in my room watching TV. I think I was watching TV or playing my Xbox or whatever. And I could hear these slat things kind of go up, and like the doors were opening and closing. And I'm like, I just got up then, and I thought, I got to find out what it is. And I got up, I opened my door, I walked straight onto the landing, pushed my mum's door open. Nothing, just darkness. And I went back in, and I didn't investigate after that. Every time I heard it after that, which was a couple of times, I didn't go in. I just left it. I thought, nah, I'm just gonna leave that. Just gonna carry on playing my game. But yeah, so I know where you're coming from with that. When you have that stuff, I experienced that, and it was a bit weird. That was just a bit unsettling as well, but not in a way that it wasn't. Well, it was a little bit frightening, but it wasn't as much frightening. It was more like, what is that? What's making that noise? I never did find out. So yeah, that was a bit odd. But anyway, quickly moving on. I just want to move on a little bit because I've got lots of questions here, and I need to get through as many as I can. So I've got loads of questions to ask you. So when you're growing up, you had a few experiences, and you're getting into the sort of paranormal, maybe questioning reality a little bit, and all that stuff. And of course, we know where that gets later on in life because it gets you to your podcast. But when you're getting older and you're having these experiences, did you start to think about what could possibly be causing them? I mean, we think of ghosts and we think of haunted houses and all that stuff, but did you start to question what possibly is a haunted house, or what is a ghost, or what it might be? Did you start to form any sort of, any opinions on that stuff?
I guess nothing that's outside of the typical kind of answer that people give, where it's these spirits are sort of, I guess there's different types of hauntings, but maybe from my point of view, where say someone has passed and then you suddenly have this all this activity happening, then it's very easy to draw a conclusion that, well, maybe that is some part of that person left here for whatever reason, and I guess it's always like the unfinished business kind of thing and so on. But I think what I eventually came to the realization of is, I think energy, can't be destroyed, right? It can, be transferred. So I think when we do eventually pass, and I mean, I'm not religious by any means, that's not really my thing. But because obviously the afterlife and everything then sort of plays into this, and even like reincarnation and all these kinds of topics. But I sort of approach it not from a religious sort of stance, but I do think that this is sort of a moment in time, and then when you do pass, that sort of I guess a soul is what we typically know it as. Goes on to learn more and to potentially, come maybe back to do your time again, or, go to a different dimension, or what kind of have you. It just seems like that, from my understanding of it, kind of seems like the cycle and the process. And it does seem like when you're in that state of that sort of, you're not currently in a physical form, you can come back to to visit those who who you may have known in that life and so on. So I think that sort of answers the thing of like, well, why isn't something maybe always haunted as well? You know what I mean? Because it's I think it's a bit more complicated. unless you're talking maybe more of like a residual haunting where these spirits may not even know that they're dead, and they kind of just, it's like a loop. They're stuck on that loop. They're doing the same thing every now and again, compared to more of the, intelligent kind of haunting where you might actually have these interactions. I do think that could actually be something that, they have the option to be there to interact or to not. Maybe I think that kind of explains why something could be extremely haunted one evening, go back the next, and nothing. I think it's not as simple as this place is haunted, that means it's haunted forever. I think I know these sort of concepts do sound a little bit strange, but just from speaking with people and I guess my own experiences, it does seem like the afterlife is quite complex, and once you have sort of died, it does seem like you can have these interactions in a number of different ways, sort of, with these people who you once knew. So I guess that's sort of the conclusion I eventually came to with hauntings, which I guess all sort of stemmed from that time up until now. I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out, of course. And, you always will come across something where you're like, oh, what exactly is that? How does that sort of fit into all of this? But I think that's where I'm sort of comfortably sitting with it all at the moment, is that, when you do pass, it does seem like you do go to this other side. I don't necessarily think it's like a heaven or a hell. It kind of seems like almost like a holding room, like a waiting room until you maybe actively choose, or maybe, it's actually out of your hands, if you are actually then going to go on to something else, like, being reborn, or potentially, maybe you might even go to another dimension and actually become an extraterrestrial, or what we understand to be an extraterrestrial. There's definitely reports of that, with people with past lives saying, they were once a grey alien or something kind of along those lines. I think all of these topics definitely cross over too. I don't think it's just hauntings, UFO abductions, cryptids. It does seem like the whole sort of paranormal has massive crossover. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting with the whole kind of haunting thing at this point in time.
Yeah, I've had this question. I'm say I haven't debated this question, but I've talked about this thought process to lots of people, and I come to a similar conclusion. But my opinion is that if we do, when we expire, and our consciousness, our self, whatever you want to call it, goes on, stays, because, energy and all that, maybe that what we enter is a form of dreamscape, and that we are, think of it when you're having a dream, and anything is possible. You can fly, you can create things, you can create environments, you can be in the cottage on the hill or whatever. Your mind is creating all that for you in a dream, although it's all a bit wacky and stuff. You're creating it. And I'm possibly, this is just an opinion, possibly that when you pass over, that the environment that you go into is an environment that is created from your thoughts, from what you want it to be. Everyone's place is different, but the only difference is that other people that have passed over are able to interact with you, so they can come into your space and you can go into their space, but in a non-direct way. You're all connected, a little bit like the theory of us now, when, for example, you're sat at home and then you think of someone, and then all of a sudden the phone rings and it's that person that you were thinking about. So in some way you've had foreknowledge, possibly, that event that just happened, the person ringing you, and you pick the phone up and it's, I don't know, it's Jack or whatever. That person has in some way given you a message, or possibly that we're all connected to some sort of cloud in the ether where all of these events are happening, and that we're able to tap into those things and have foreknowledge of an event that is going to happen, and it happens just as you think, or just after you've thought of it. So yeah, with the paranormal and afterlife, there's lots of different theories, there's lots of different thoughts on what may or may not happen. As I say, we none of us are going to know until the day we pop our clogs anyway. So, it's all speculation up to then. But there are people that have obviously, on the record, have died on the operating table or have been in an accident, and they've had an out of body experience, and they've seen themselves from a high, and they've even said, "Look, I was clinically dead, and I can tell you what the doctors were saying. I can tell you the conversation they were having, and what's happening there. How is that able to, what's the process happening there? If this person is on the slab and they're completely dead, as the machines tell them, where are they? How are they able to know what's going on? So there's definitely something going on. There's definitely something happening. A little bit like the poltergeist phenomenon, where you have mainly, not always, but mainly younger children or a newborn baby in the home, and you have stuff happening, and it escalates, and it happens for like a year or so, and then it just suddenly stops. It dissipates, and it can be little stuff like something knocking and tapping, or things disappearing and appearing, or it could be really bad stuff like furniture moving around and all that really crazy stuff, or it could be voices, something more violent, where people are actually getting punched and bitten and pinched and all that stuff. So the way I'm thinking of it is that maybe that there's something in us, in our mind or whatever, that we have the ability to project, that we don't have any control over, that we've lost the ability to control it. It's just there and it happens. But when we get to a certain age where we become, I don't want to use I'm going to use the word for the sake of it, indoctrinated into society, that we lose it. It goes away, because we've got all this, the woes of society on our shoulders. We got to pay bills and go to work and do all those things that we don't really want to do. And we become a little bit apathetic and like, and it goes, you just lose it. So maybe that is it. I don't know. But, I do find the whole haunted house, ghosts and all that, it's a fascinating topic. And there is definitely something going on, because people through the ages have experienced stuff, and people still are experiencing stuff. But what they are experiencing, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we're going to have the answers. I mean, I know of people who have done investigations and have seen stuff, and even today they can't explain what they experienced. I mean, for example, Rob Kirkup from How Haunted Podcast, he has done a lot of investigations, and he did one in a castle. I can't remember which castle it was. But anyway, they were getting a guided tour around this castle, and they asked one of the people, is there any ghosts in the place? And the guy turned around the tour and said, yeah, there's actually a small boy that is in this area, and he's always here, and if you ask him to show himself, he will. And they're obviously, they're loving that, and they ask for this young boy who lived many hundreds of years ago or whatever to show himself. And there's these long curtains in this hall where they were stood, and they clearly saw the impression of two small hands pushing out the curtain from behind. And they thought it was actually a child behind these long curtains in this castle, doing some sort of prank. And of course, the curtain went out, and then it moved back slowly against the wall. And of course, they moved the curtain back. There's nothing there. So what was that? What was? what was they interacting with? It's just bizarre, absolutely bizarre, but amazing at the same time. So moving on a little bit from ghosts and haunted houses and stuff, I was going to ask you, just on the other side of the coin, because they kind of go together in a kind of a weird way. What's your take on the whole UFO alien phenomenon? Where do you sort of fit in with your mindset with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm probably questioning weekly, if not even daily. And I guess like with Paranormal Thoughts, there's a lot of emphasis on that particular end of the paranormal. I think that's because it's sort of the thing I'm probably most interested in. And it just seems to be what the audience also really resonates with. It's a really interesting topic because it's so loaded and there's so many different experiences. A lot of similarities, of course, that maybe fit more of a typical experience that someone might have. But there's so many interesting little differences, and it's a very hard thing to get a grasp on. It's like as soon as you think you may have an answer to some of it, you'll read or come across something else, and you're like, "What? How does this even fit into any of this?" It's. I think for me, there's definitely something going on, and I don't necessarily think that every experience is potentially, a maybe stereotypical abduction. It's even the thing of are UFOs even related? The only reason why we might think they are is because some people witness them right before an abduction, or maybe on either end of the sort of beginning or the actual end of the abduction. But there's also, I've spoken to many people who have never seen a UFO and have, they'll claim to be abducted by ETs, so even the whole UFO thing is kind of its own issue as well. So I guess the thing that I spend a lot of time on is the actual like fourth kind of encounter where people are coming into contact with these beings and having, a number of different kinds of experiences. Obviously, a lot of the time, people seem to be taken, maybe in the middle of the night when they're in a sleep kind of stance, taken somewhere. Often a lot of the time it's assumed that maybe onto some sort of craft, but as I said, a lot of people don't even see crafts, so we're kind of maybe making conclusions some of the time, but hard to say. And having experiments done, or maybe shown images or videos, or even having conversations with these beings. And a lot of the time, it does seem like this phenomena happens to people kind of throughout their entire life. It's really interesting to speak with someone who maybe thinks they only have sort of one encounter, but then you can kind of uncover other phenomena that is very related to the whole abduction experience, which they may not even be aware of. So I guess in my time, I think the worrying thing for me with this phenomena is it's actually happening a lot. From my understanding, the amount of people who contact me with their own experiences, and once again, some are positive, some are more negative. It really depends. The negative ones are obviously quite the unsettling and upsetting people to hear from, because this is something that they don't want happening to them, and they don't really know who to turn to. There's no real in your sort of everyday life, that is not really, someone you can typically turn to, like a lot of these people, these experiences can literally be like a form of abuse for them, and they can't go to their like employer and say, I need a week off just because these experiences have really ramped up, and, I need some time to mentally and physically recover, that there's no sort of support for anything like that. Which is, really, it's upsetting. But then, on the other end of the spectrum, people who believe that they've, signed on for these abductions, maybe in a past life, or, it's hard to sort of say. A lot of people, have really different opinions on that. And from these experiences, they have actually kind of bettered themselves. People have had the idea that the beings have maybe helped them with an illness, or have kind of given them some sort of maybe like sixth sense, in a sense. Like people who there's a lot of different reports from people, but often a lot of the time it seems like people seem to have these experiences and maybe have a sense of they have a mission, in a sense. They kind of believe they've been taken for a reason, and they maybe are supposed to share the word of it seems like a lot of the time these beings want to better our existence. People kind of get the sense of we need to find renewable energies and stop killing the planet. I just spoke to a woman recently who believes that the beings who have been taking her no longer have a world of their own to live on, and they've kind of now just traveling through the galaxy, I suppose, kind of looking for somewhere to set their roots again, something that is inhabitable for them. And these beings told her that we should consider ourselves extremely lucky that we do have this earth to live on, and like the way we're treating it, they just, as you could imagine, anyone would, think it's just barbaric in a sense what we do just on the daily. But yeah, I mean, it's so wide. And I think this is the issue with maybe skeptics or just non-believers, is they can't wrap their head around the idea that this phenomena is so, it's just so immense. And people just want the easiest answer. They want to be able to like see the evidence, hold the evidence, and my whole thing is just like, whatever this phenomena is, it's far more advanced than us, far more intelligent. They could be doing whatever they want right under our noses, which, I believe is what is going on, without anyone ever actually getting that full glimpse of, any actual evidence. Why would they leave any sort of form of solid proof, to actually expose themselves? And yes, you could then say, well, that's just my answer to kind of say, to explain away why there's no evidence. But I mean, there's tons of evidence, like even just the first-hand accounts, people who, could lose everything from coming forward and speaking about these issues. I don't think you can belittle that, like if someone is claiming to, be taken in the middle of the night, or even, sometimes in the middle of the day. I've spoken to someone who was driving their car and they can't account for 3 hours, and they had driven somewhere they've never been before, and they'd ordered like McDonald's that they would never have eaten, and they're like, how did this all happen? Where have I been the last 3 hours? You know what I mean? Like people, that's not someone making that up. You know what I mean? It's very real especially for these people, and whether or not, as I mentioned, all of these experiences are actually a typical alien abduction, it's hard to say, but there's something going on. And the fact that, they're seeing these beings or having strange marks left on their body that represent, a typical kind of abduction. I mean, it's strange. And I don't think you can easily discredit it just because, I don't know, there's not evidence that, someone who's skeptical needs in order to actually believe them. I think their accounts are extremely credible a lot of the time. So I think there's some amazing evidence just right there, depending on who you're speaking with.
Do you think that let's just say that the aliens are real and that they're as real as we are? Okay. Do you think that they come from another place and they visit this planet because they have some invested interest in it? Or, and this is what I'm more likely to start to think, that they've always been on this planet and they've always been here, and that we are we live on its surface, but they don't bother us in the sense of they haven't eradicated us because we don't pose a threat to them, not directly. So, and they are so advanced that they see us as ants. We are not enough. We don't need to they don't need to give us any thought. But the problem is, we are becoming a problem because we're becoming messy. We're messing things up. We've got all these wars going on, all these conflicts, and now maybe they're thinking, okay, we have to do something because these people are getting a little bit out of hand. And maybe that a lot of people that are experiencing the phenomenon are experiencing it because they're trying to make more people aware of how they are, but they don't actually speak the lingo. Look, for example, I get on a boat and I go into the deepest, darkest jungle, okay, where there's a tribe that haven't had any contact with anyone forever. They just live in their own little tribe. They've got their own beliefs. They look up at the stars and they think that that's their dead relatives. I don't know. Maybe they've got their own religion and all that, right? And there's me in me shorts and me t-shirt, just got off me boat, and I go into the jungle, and I wanna introduce myself to them, and I can't understand why they're throwing spears at me. They think I'm a devil. They think I'm a weird white bloke. They've never seen me before, so I can understand that I am immediately a threat to them because they've never experienced me before. Maybe we're like the people that live in the jungle as a tribe who want to be left alone. Maybe that's us when it comes to the UFO phenomenon, that we aren't able to perceive what these, whatever they are, want, or what they're doing, because we can't think that our IQ doesn't get that big. We just can't understand. We're not at the top of our game when it comes to stuff like that, and we're still like in the Stone Age when it comes to that. And I think that they're not really worried because they're so far. If it is a real thing, they're so far advanced that they don't care what we think, because we're not part of their plan. Then we're not part of their mission, or whatever you want to call it. We're just like, we're just things that live on the surface. Maybe we could look at it from that point of view, or we could look at it from another point of view where we are a product of their experiment. The Earth is a giant petri dish, and we are part of their experiment, and we're being monitored. And that's why people get abducted, because they need to check certain things. Maybe we're being, as a species, we're being terraformed so that one day they can make some hybrid where they can take over. And in 10,000 years, that we won't be around because they would have taken over, and we would have been replaced. I don't know. There's so many possibilities. Because, for example, if you let's go back to the 1950s, when people started to see, it goes back further than that. People have seen things in the sky, in Roman times, 2,000 years ago. But let's just go in recent times, like the 50s, where it started to get into pop culture. And people go, oh, I saw this alien man. He was a great big, he had a big space helmet on. He had these big claw hands. And then you look in pop culture, look at the films, look at what was on at the cinema, that kind of stuff. Then you move on to like the 70s, and you had all these kind of weird people giving experiences of like these weird kind of praying mantis kind of things, and stuff like that. And you look at what was prevalent in the 70s. We had a lot of B-movie, sci-fi, Doctor Who, that kind of stuff, where that kind of stuff was in, that was the monsters back then. So people were seeing that. And then, of course, the 80s, you had the Greys started to come around, and you had Whitley Strieber, and you had, Communion and his stuff that happened in his cabin, and other people like Travis Walton, a little bit later on, that had an experience, and everybody's going, it's a grey, had big eyes. And now we're kind of moving on a little bit, where people are seeing these kind of beings that seem to be like, even like to the point where these craft seem to be translucent. They seem to be organic. So is the phenomenon showing us what it thinks? It wants to show us what we can perceive as, maybe it's so amazing that we can't perceive it in its real true form. So it has to show us something that we can understand. For example, when the explorers in their big galleon ships went away and met new tribes back in the olden days when we started sailing around the world, some of the people that would come up to the shore and meet the crews in their boats, they would say, well, they wouldn't, they would kind of understand how you go, and we'd try and show them the ships in the harbour, and they couldn't see the ships because they'd never seen a ship before. So their brains couldn't process what they were looking at. So they were blind to it. It was only when they put them on the boats and rowed them out there that as soon as they got near the ships, they saw this great big ship appear. It's like that. Maybe that's us. Maybe that's us with the UFO phenomenon. I don't know. I think it's such a huge. I mean, okay, they could be coming from different planets. They could be interdimensional. They could have already been here. This might be alien planet. They might have always been here for millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know, but maybe we popped up. Maybe they're like, oh no, they're out of trees now. They're walking around. They're gonna evolve these things, and they're gonna be like people. And what can we do with them? Oh, maybe we can experiment on them. Maybe we can cultivate them like a flower. Maybe we can create something lovely. Oh no, they've created an atom bomb. Oh, it's all gone. Pete Tom.
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but I mean, all you have to do is kind of look through history, like in the 50s and like the 40s even, there's a lot of sightings, and it's kind of when this really kicked off a lot. But, you look at that time when, like nuclear weapons and, the atomic bomb and so on sort of, entered our lives. And, even the thing of the technology, like the massive amounts of progress in such a short amount of time, and obviously that's just continued since then. It's pretty phenomenal that it all kind of weirdly lines up as well with these beings being witnessed a lot more. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, could they have always been here? Very, very much so. The ancient alien theory, of course, and once again, maybe we are just ants to them. And my thing's always, if we were in their sort of position, I think we would be doing the exact same thing, where it's like you watch from afar. You don't, if we are just ants, like they're not just going to make themselves known, and we're literally like in the zoo. You know what I mean? Like, it's, does every animal understand the idea that they're in captivity? Of course not. If they're born into it, they're witnessing these things, but don't actually understand the reason why they're there or anything, So I definitely think a lot of the time, these things are, maybe that's why they're so cold to us as well, just because, they don't even understand, our sort of emotional makeup. My understanding is that they're so far advanced, they're past that, you know what I mean? Like, they're very practical, very literal. So like, when we're even trying to ask some of the questions that, we're discussing today, it's not even a thing for them, because, it's all just so, everything we're trying to, it's like, why this, why that? And for them, it's just like, well, there's no why. It's because, we're doing this for a purpose, and that's all it is. I've spoken to people who believe that the interactions they had with these beings, literally, that's their job. You know what I mean? That is their purpose, is to be doing these abductions, and they're sort of a part of a greater good, almost like a colony in a sense of, maybe bees or something, where they all are sort of working together for this sort of project or what kind of have you, But Yeah, I don't know, but at the same time, not everyone has those sort of experiences where, they are sort of just taken and don't really get any answers. I've spoken to many people who believe that they're able to get answers either from, an actual memory talking to these beings or, through hypnosis or even meditation, to actually receive some answers. And that's kind of, I feel like a lot of the phenomena we know about now is from those people being able to give us those answers. But yeah, it's a very difficult one, and it's hard to maybe try to convince people as well. You can't have to just not just believe in it, but I think there's a reason why I think some of us who maybe are a bit more open to it as well and can kind of make a lot more sense of it as well. Like, you do have to be quite open-minded, but at the same time, I'm extremely skeptical. I come across people and certain accounts, and you get that sense of, I don't know what it is that you're witnessing or experiencing, but I'm like, oh, maybe there's another underlying issue. You know what I mean? And of course, there's always going to be those sorts of people. But I mean, I don't think people necessarily realize that like this is happening to millions of people, and I don't think there's all these millions of people experiencing this exact same thing and have some underlying medical condition that we're not aware of. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I do think that there are people out there having these experiences, and I don't know. It's the more time I spend on it, it's a constant battle for me, because I think I'm like, yeah, I'm completely 100% on board with this, but then it's very easy. You kind of catch yourself being like, do I actually believe in this? You know what I mean? Because it sounds just insane. But then, from my own experiences, I'm like, well, I can't deny this phenomena, because I feel like I'm somehow a part of it, even just with doing the podcast and so on, but also, speaking with everyday experiences, not people who are authors or researchers or, who have you, they're not trying to push a certain agenda by any means. They're just people who are like, hey, I'm a nurse and this happens to me, you know what I mean? Or, I'm a builder, or what kind of have you. There's just people from everyday sort of walks of life who, are having these extreme accounts, and who am I to disprove any of that, by just not believing them? Because all you have to do is have a conversation around this stuff, and you get a sense very quickly for those who have actually experienced something, in comparison maybe someone who is trying to send you astray with either lying or maybe actually having maybe some sort of mental illness going on as well. All you have to do is speak with someone, and I think our human instinct is pretty good at picking up that sort of bull meter with a lot of that stuff.
What do you moving on slightly as we're getting to the end of this episode, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on staying on the UFO topic and aliens and stuff. What's your thoughts on the Congress hearings and the witnesses that have spoken about certain things? Where do you think is that going to go anywhere, or because I get the impression right now that there are people in the background that want to shut this down as quickly as possible?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I mean it's a very exciting time, and over the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, there's been a lot of things kind of being set up in order for all of this to kind of get to where it's at, and I hope that it's all legitimate and it's actually going to kind of ruffle some feathers and actually bring more of this information to light, because I feel like this is kind of the thing that has to happen in order for people to really get on board, right? But then on the other hand, all of this starts to happen, and then people go, oh, I believed in UFOs until the government told me they were real. And I'm like, what do you want then? Because I feel like anyway, people are just going to be like, nah, it's all fake, and it's all a conspiracy. They're trying to they're distracting you with this, and everyone's always got a way to sort of deflect from it. And now with like AI and so on, I mean, I don't really know. I feel like the time's passed now in order for complete disclosure, because you're not really going to be able to believe anything that you read or witness, you know what I mean, unless you're physically there in a sense. I feel like there's so much in form of like, just people literally, like trying to send you astray. And now with, AI and everything, I don't really know how we're ever going to know if something is legitimate anymore. But I feel like maybe the time for actual honest disclosure is kind of past in that sense. And it's still that thing of, I just don't know what people want or expect from a lot of this stuff. Like, it's so complex, and it probably is a reason why a lot of it has been secretive for, like, I just reflect back on the pandemic, how, society for a minute there kind of completely broke down just because, you couldn't like leave your house and so on. So try to bring this to the entire world of, there's this phenomena that's happening. Like, it would just, you could see how like it would just all, society as we've sort of know it could potentially just completely collapse, because we saw it happen over something else, So I really don't know. I hope it's all kind of coming up for the right reason. But my argument from the very get-go with disclosure is like, I don't really subscribe to the whole government involvement kind of thing. I definitely think there's evidence that they do know certain things, maybe even less than what we sort of give them credit for knowing. There's the whole like Eisenhower kind of like selling, like pretty much doing a deal with these beings that, we get technology for them experimenting on us. You can believe that if you so wish. I think it's maybe, I mean, that's quite a fantastical kind of, makes for like a great novel or something. I think that kind of that sort of theory, but I think it's I think it's a lot. I think there's a lot more going on than something as simple as these extremely intelligent beings coming to, once again, America, which is always, where a lot of these experiences happen, and they definitely are at the forefront of the alien kind of phenomena. These beings coming and going, we'll speak to your president and cut a deal. I'm like, there's no way that could ever happen. Once again, we're the ants, right? Most likely, like, there's take us to the leader ant and we'll cut a deal. Like, so I don't think the government involvement is as important to at least to the experiencer kind of phenomena, because I don't think they really know anything about that. I understand the thing of, this extremely advanced craft being a threat, because of course, like, it is quite alarming what the craft that has been caught on radar and so on, and firsthand sort of experiences, what they've seen. It's unlike anything that man could probably even be in, just due to the actual like G forces and so on. But in saying that, like, these things have existed, as you said, go back 2,000 years ago. There's been lights seen in the sky, and has anything ever come of it? You know what I mean? Like, no, we've never been like annihilated or anything like that. So it's an interesting thing that is the government involvement or even their worry that big of a deal? Probably not. From my point of view, this is all from my point of view, of course, because I'm speaking to people weekly who are having firsthand experiences with these beings and this craft. You know what I mean? Like, the government putting out a statement or anything like that, it doesn't even feel like it's in the same reality. You know what I mean? Like, it all could be connected, but I don't know. I think we're just so past the need to hear from them, because people aren't going to believe it anyway, because there's a massive sort of, anti-establishment and everything like that. But I definitely think there are certain people trying to stamp it out. And of course, there's always going to be, they'll use media and everything to kind of discredit, like they always have. They always try to dig up certain things on these people. And that's why, people don't want to come forward and talk about it, because forever they've literally turned us against ourselves. Like, once again, talking about what we're talking about right now, a lot of people will think we're nuts for talking about it, because they've literally set up that as a reaction You talk about the little green men kind of thing in these crafts, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. They've sort of done their job in being able to discredit anyone who can come forward. And now that there's actual people who are ex-government, ex-military coming forward and being like, yeah, this is what we've seen, it makes it a lot harder to disprove. But still, I mean, we've known about, this UFO footage that's been circulating, that came out in 2017. And it's only, in 2020 that people are like, oh, hang on, like, we have this footage, and it's still only now, like, people are kind of connecting with it. I'm like, this stuff has existed, and that footage is from 2004. You know what I mean? And we've known about it for so long, yet it hasn't really changed anything either, So I don't really know what disclosure is going to achieve or even do. The attention span now of everyone's so small. Is it just going to be like another article? Maybe it's interesting for a week and that just goes away. I mean, I really don't know. It's fascinating. It's a very interesting time to be involved in this phenomena because, yeah, it's getting pretty weird. And hopefully, as I said, I hope it's all for the right reasons, and it's actually everyone's being very truthful. Who is sort of who are sort of the faces of this. But I mean, it's hard to say at this point.
Well, I think you've rounded this episode off quite nicely there. I just wanted to add that the most shocking thing that I saw when we came to the hearings was having people with lots of medals and military service under oath, so they couldn't, they risked going to prison if they intentionally lied, and they told all of these things, that there was this and that, and that there was what they called it, non-human biological something recovered, but didn't actually say alien bodies. But they talked of many things, and from the greater public, it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, it was. You'd think that something like that is like these people are risking their whole careers and their whole everything, putting it on the line to tell people I'm under oath. I can go to prison if I'm lying, and I'm risking it because I want to tell what I know. And the greater public are like, yeah, whatever. Oh yeah, just whatever.
Honestly, I think that day that hearing happened, like the way I was approaching it was like, this is probably one of the greatest things to happen in our lifetime, in a sense. At least the catalyst, like what we're witnessing right now could potentially be like the floodgates are about to open. You know what I mean? Like with those certain, like, and we haven't had anything, really set in stone yet. They're still kind of dancing around because, the whole thing of he can't really say too much at this point in time, which is fine. But once again, it's all about, that's kind of the reason for this hearing, is to get the interest in Congress, then to be like, okay, well, let's actually dig a bit deeper into this and actually get a hold of this evidence that you've apparently witnessed, So it's like baby steps still. We're still getting there. But I just remember that evening, I went out for dinner and everyone else is, just caught up in their sort of everyday life kind of stuff. And I'm like, said to my wife, I'm like, does anyone here really realize like the like the substantial event that really took place today in terms of, potentially getting a little bit closer to actually uncovering the truth about extraterrestrials and, UAPs? And she's like, oh, not now. just leave it alone. But it was literally like weighing on my mind to be the point of like, this could be one of the most significant things to happen for anyone who's interested in this phenomena. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like, oh, it's just more news. It just kind of gets lumped in. And even just the amount of mainstream media that wasn't picking up on it, I was like, this is just insanity. Like, this is, but once again, it all will sort of be tried to get, just pushed under the table and silenced. So I don't know. It's a very interesting time. That's all I can keep saying to people, is I don't really know where it's all going or if it's all happening for the right reason, but we can only hope, I think.
Well, yeah, I hope it doesn't. I hope everyone doesn't get shut down and the powers that be move in and think, okay, you've had your little hearings. Now it doesn't go any further than this, and then that's it. It doesn't. It stops because we know. I can't. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit harsh towards the greater general public, because you can't blame people that much when the news they consume is basically teaching people how to think. You watch the news every day and you're being told one story. If all you watch is a certain news channel on a certain channel on TV every day, then you're being told to think by that news channel. If you're not going out there and looking at alternative sources and independent people doing news gathering, then you've only got one point of view. A lot of people don't have the time for that. They've got busy lives, they've got children, they've got jobs and all the other things, so they haven't got time to go through all these different news sources. So you can't blame them. But I do think that society now is very people are just very apathetic about stuff, and it's now, what's the point? So what what's it going to benefit me? I think that if disclosure did actually happen in full disclosure, it will either go one way or the other. We'll just go, yeah, whatever, and the things will be flying around, and things will go on like they did before, and nothing will really change. Or it will be, Bob the alien on the White House lawn, and suddenly maybe he'll be the next Messiah, and everybody will be going like, can you fix Timmy's bad leg because you're an alien and you've got technology? Or someone will try and use that technology to make themselves more powerful. What can we do? I mean, this is where I think it is at the moment, that there are a lot of internal fighting going on, because the private contractors that maybe have a little bit of this technology don't want to give it up, because it's something that they've got that makes them a bit more powerful than another company. But if their government have its way, and these hearings do get more pace and start to do things, then that means that by law they're going to have to give up any information they've got. They're going to have to give up. And I don't think those people, these corporations, that the military complex, and they've got a lot of power, they've got a lot of push, and they've got a lot of money, and I think that they can push back against the Congress and the government, because a lot of those people that are in Congress, they lobby them and they pay them a lot of money. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. People are in each other's pockets, and envelopes and stuff, money. Money talks. Follow the money if you want the answers. Follow the cash, because that'll tell you what you need to know. So who knows? It'd be interesting to see where it goes. It's been since we've been talking about aliens, in the news and that, since 1947, and we're still waiting for some. I mean, that's not to discredit that people are experiencing something. They are experiencing something. There's plenty of cases out there where multiple people have had these abduction scenarios, and others people that have had missing time, and we haven't even touched that people go into the national forests and disappear, just vanish. Where are they going? Where are those people going?
No.
So
I know, that stuff's wild.
Maybe that's another episode we can touch on another episode of Paratalk.
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
we can go into missing people who go into the forests and national parks and just gone. They pop out of existence, never to be found again. Or when they are found, they're found in very strange situations, halfway up a tree or somewhere. Who knows? Anyway, so I think we've come to the end of this episode, but what's in store for your podcast in the coming months? What have you got planned?
At the moment, I'm doing like a 3-part series that I haven't really said to anyone exactly what it is yet, but I just put a teaser out over the week. And the first episode is coming out this Friday, and then for the next sort of 2 Fridays following, there'll be an episode. But it's me looking for answers about some of my own experiences, and I'm going pretty deep. And without sort of giving too much away, because I don't know. It's very new for me in a sense. Like I've been very open over the last 6 years on Paranormal Thoughts, but this is a whole new this is a whole new sort of this is what I mean. Like even talking about it now, like it's very strange, and even I'm just very wary of the whole thing. Like I've been sitting on it for some months now because I sort of needed the courage to upload it. Pretty much, it's some very weird sort of material. But what I can say is I've sort of seeked out some help to uncover some experiences that I may not remember. If that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight to what's going on, I feel like this is maybe kind of a podcast first as well of someone, like a host of a podcast actually being like, all right, here is like unedited, very, very raw kind of a very raw sort of moment. Here it is, me sort of experiencing it to sort of try to uncover answers for myself, but also to show people that there are options to receive answers which, you don't really have to be skeptical about, or maybe worried that you might have a negative experience from it, So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, which is going to be coming out, which is it's going to be an interesting one. I don't really know how people are going to take it, but all I can say is I have uncovered some memories that I wasn't aware of, and I can see them now after going through the sort of process of the process, as clear as day, as if they had happened, and I did not expect to have that happen. And then now it's a lot of questioning about, okay, have these things actually happened, or is this something else? It's once again you look for answers and you just keep finding more questions all the time. But that's what I'm sort of doing at the moment. So it's very different for me. Well, not different, but it's me being very honest and open, more than I've ever been. And I'm looking forward to kind of putting it out and sort of getting on with other things, I think, because it's been weighing on my mind a lot the last few months.
Well, that sounds like one for a listen. I'll definitely be keeping my eyes peeled for that. But as for you out there, dear listener, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly did, and Dylan will be back. I'm sure we'll do another episode in the coming months. We'll pick a topic that we can deep dive into and have a chat about. His links to everything will be with this podcast, and also be on the website as well. Remember to like and share, because that's how we get the extra listeners and sort of grow a little bit. And also, I've added onto the website, you can now buy me a coffee. So if you look on the website and also on the podcast, if you want to donate, you can do if you really love the episodes. But I've got to thank you again, Dylan, for coming on. And until next time, dear listeners, speak to you soon.